There was a girl called Tippin Gee, and she, although she was only 8 or 9 years old, she was really good at cooking and cleaning and housework and DIY and gardening and all that kind of thing, because she lived with her stepmother. Because her father had died some time ago, and her stepmother did not like her very much. Well, now one day, when Tippin Gee was out at school, her stepmother felt that she was short of cash, so she thought, what to do? Ah, I know, make some sweets to sell in the marketplace. Now, in order to do that, obviously, she was going to have to boil up a great big vat of water in a great big cauldron. But when she went to the wood pile to get the wood to do this, she found that they were totally out of wood. Well, nothing else she could do but go to the forest to try and collect some. But she went to the first part of the forest, and there, all the wood was dry as dust. It just crumbled away. There was nothing, not even any kindling, let alone any light. So she went into the middle part of the forest, where the villagers came less often, and there everything was all damp and mossy, and it had damp rot instead of dry rot, and that all crumbled away, but in a different way. So it was that she ended up walking to the middle of the forest, the heart of the forest, where the villagers almost never came. And she had seen no sight of human being or hut or dwelling or anything for miles. But there was all kinds of wonderful wood, great big logs, well, exactly the right size, loads of kindling, so it could have been made for her. She bundled it all up, and then she roped it up, and then when she finished she saw that it was far too much, far too big for any one person to get back to the village by themselves. So just on the off chance she shouted, "Friends, is there anyone here who would help me carry this wood back to my village?" Silence. Not a pin dropped, not a breath of air stirred, not a bird sang, not a twig snapped. And then the second time, she looked at the wood and she was quite greedy. She really didn't want to leave it. It would last her a good long time. And she said, "Is there anyone at all who could help me with this?"
I will help you, my dear, but I will have to be paid.
And to her amazement, a strange, twisted, writhen figure came out from between the trees. She had not seen or heard at all before. And she said, yes, yes, my dear sir, I'm sure I can do something when we get back to my village."
All right, my dear, but make sure you pay me.
"Of course, my dear sir." And with a dreadful ease, he shouldered the whole burden and took it back to the village and laid it in the woodpile outside the stepmother's house.
And now, my dear, our bargain. Some payment is due.
"Oh yes, my dear sir, oh yes." And the stepmother, she thought and she thought and she racked her brains, but of course she'd been going to the marketplace to make some money because she'd run out. Because she was short, that's why she'd been doing it. And she thought and she thought and she thought, and an idea occurred to her, the kind of idea that occurs to you that might not be a very good idea, but it's what occurs to you when you're having to think really quickly. And she said, "What about a servant?"
What are you?
"No, my dear sir, not me, not me. No, I have a stepdaughter. Yes, she's very good at cooking and cleaning and DIY and gardening and everything like that. She's awfully practical."
A child to live with me in the forest?
She's a very hard worker, yes.
All right. But I can hardly collect her here.
No, my dear sir, no, that wouldn't be so good. Yes. Every day after school, the children always congregate at the ford by the riverbank. Always. Yes. And,
By the riverbank, but how will I tell her? All children look the same.
Well, she'll be called Tippin Gee, and I'll make sure she's wearing a yellow dress.
Yellow tomorrow, called Tippin Gee.
Yes.
I will be there.
Well, after he'd gone, she was glad to be rid of him, and beginning to feel uncomfortable about this bargain, as you might imagine, but a bargain is a bargain. However, as we've said, Tippin Gee was a canny lass, and as luck would have it, she'd come home while they'd been there, and she'd heard her name spoken in shrill accents by her stepmother. So she'd listened at the door before she'd been creeping on towards the passage, towards her own room. She'd listened at the door and she'd heard that something was afoot. So that night, after her stepmother went to bed, she went round to the houses of her friends, and they all lived in one-storey buildings, and she knew which were their bedrooms, and she knocked on their bedroom windows and she said, tomorrow, 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 tomorrow if you love me, wear a yellow dress. If you love me, wear a yellow dress. And so the next day, when the old man came to the ford, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, many of the children seemed to be in yellow.
Which of you is Tippin Gee? Tippin Gee, come to me.
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee, she's Tippin Gee, we're all Tippin Gee.
No! Which of you is Tippin Gee? Because Tippin Gee, come to me.
And the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands and they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee, she's Tippin Gee, we're all Tippin Gee.
No!
So the old man came to the stepmother's house and he wasn't best pleased.
My dear,
Yes?
all the children appear to be wearing yellow. They all appear to be called Tippin Gee. I don't think you can trick me this way.
Of course not, my dear sir. It must have been a game. They were playing a game, I tell you. And tomorrow, I promise you'll be there wearing a purple dress. Yes, purple.
Purple?
Yes.
Tomorrow,
Yes.
I will be there.
My dear sir. Of course, yes. Well, the stepmother was feeling even more uncomfortable about this, but a promise is a promise. But Tippin Gee, now she'd been warned that something was firmly up after the incident at the ford, she'd run home. She'd been listening, and that night after her stepmother went to bed, she went round to the bedrooms of her friends and knocked on their windows and she said, tomorrow, 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 tomorrow if you love me, wear a purple dress. If you love me, wear a purple dress. And so the next day, when the old man came to the ford, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the children seemed to be in purple.
Which of you is Tippin Gee? Tippin Gee, you belong with me.
The children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee, she's Tippin Gee, we're all Tippin Gee.
No! Which of you is Tippin Gee? Tippin Gee, you belong to me.
The children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee, she's Tippin Gee, we're all Tippin Gee together. Well now, the old man came to the stepmother's house and he really was starting to get
My
angry.
dear,
Yes?
all the children are in purple. They all say they are Tippin Gee. Don't think you can trick me
Of
this
course not, my dear sir. Coincidence! I swear it was coincidence.
Well,
Tomorrow, and she'll be wearing a black dress. Yes, black.
black tomorrow.
Yes.
Well, tomorrow, my dear, I will have a servant. One way. Or tongue.
Well, the stepmother was feeling even worse about this bargain. But some oaths cannot be broken. But Tippin Gee, she'd run home, she'd been listening at the door, and that night after her stepmother went to bed, she went round to their bedroom windows and she said, tomorrow, 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 if you love me, wear a black dress. If you love me, wear a black dress.
Am I wearing
And
that?
so the next day, when the old man came to the ford, all the children of the village, even the boys, were in black.
Which of you is Tippin Gee? Because Tippin Gee, you are mine, you hear? Mine!
And the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee, she's Tippin Gee, we're all Tippin Gee too.
No! Which of you is Tippin Gee? Tippin Gee, you are mine, you hear? Mine for all of time.
But the children, they shook their heads and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee, she's Tippin Gee, we're all Tippin Gee too. So he was furious when he came to the
My
stepmother's house.
dear,
Yes.
all the children in this village are called Tippin Gee. You belong to me.
Well, and after that, the old man of the forest, he took the stepmother away to live with him in the forest, and nobody ever saw or heard anything more of her ever again. But Tippin Gee, as we've said, well, she already knew how to run the house and garden. She'd been doing it for years. So that night, there she was left in hers and her father's house with hers and her father's things, and she invited all the friends round who'd come together to save her, and they held a great big party with good things to eat and drink, and as the fun waxed at its height, the children, they laughed and they clapped their hands, they shouted, I'm Tippin Gee. She's Tippin Gee. We're all Tippin Gee too. Thank you.